The House Judiciary Committee announced Friday that it will return from its August recess early to consider 3 gun safety bills. The 3 bills they are considering are the Keep Americans Safe Act, which involves banning high-capacity magazines, the Extreme Risk Protection Orders Act, which would prevent those who are deemed a risk to themselves and others from getting guns, and the Disarm Hate Act, which would prevent those convicted of misdemeanor hate crimes from owning guns. The committee says it also plans to hold a hearing on assault weapons in late September. Democrats are not the only ones taking up the issue of gun control. President Trump addressed the issue Thursday night during a campaign rally in Manchester, New Hampshire.
But people have to remember, however, that there is a mental illness problem that has to be dealt with. It's not the gun that pulls the trigger. It's the person holding the gun. We can't make it harder for good, solid, law-abiding citizens to protect themselves. We will always uphold the right to self-defense, and we will always uphold the Second Amendment. We will.
All right, let's bring in Joel Payne and Lauren Claffey. Joel is a Democratic strategist, former Hillary for America senior aide, and vice president at MWWPR. And Lauren is a Republican strategist, former Department of Homeland Security deputy assistant secretary for public affairs in the Trump administration, and is a managing director at Hamilton Place Strategy. They're both in our Washington bureau. Guys, mark your calendars. September 4th is the date that the House Judiciary Committee will come back early to debate gun legislation. So, Joel, I want to start it with you. How much political capital are Democrats willing to spend on the issue of gun control? And do they feel there is a good chance they can get their proposed measures through a Republican Senate and a president, obviously, that's proven to be an uphill battle in the past?
Well, to me, it's all about the framing. I actually don't see it as Democrats spending political capital. You know, I've been saying this to anybody who will listen. Progressives have won the culture war on guns. It's a 90% issue with background checks. Even 54% of Republicans support it. It's a 60% issue with, the assault weapons ban. It's an issue that actually Republicans have been trending in the wrong way on for a long time. They're on the wrong side of a lot of Americans. I think Democrats need to turn this into a voting issue, and they need to use it as the hammer that it can be in an electoral setup. But in the past, Democrats have not been able to successfully execute that. I think you're going to see Democrats attempt to make Republicans pay the price. People like Pat Toomey, in 2022, he's probably going to face a Democrat who's going to bring this up as an issue that they're going to hold him accountable for.
Yeah, certainly shaping up to be a continuing debate as we head into the election. Now, Lauren, how do Republicans navigate this? Should they oppose any proposals Democrats put forward, or is there somewhere to find common ground on this issue?
Yeah, so one, I'll start with Joel's comment about Toomey. You have to remember that he was one of the primary sponsors on a gun control bill, background check legislation in the last Congress that got stalled when and this was back when President Obama was in office. And so this is not something that I think that that Toomey is going to be hit on too hard. And I think that is going to be the case with a lot of these issues. You'll see some nuance, I think, with the gun control debate as it goes forward within the Republican Party. Most are in favor of some sort of checks and balances and controls around who has access to guns and making sure that there's responsible legislation and policies there. But, we are in a country where minorities have an outside voice in Congress. And by minority, I mean rural communities, low population states, areas where gun control issue is still very, very, very unpopular for these people, and that they very much believe in the Second Amendment. So I think it would be foolhardy to say that the whole country, Democrats have won the cultural issue, the whole country's behind much stricter gun control measures, assault rifle bans, the whole 9 yards. You're going to only see moderate increases, I think, into any sort of public opinion on what is going to pass and be acceptable in Congress.
Now, Tom, let me just add one quick point to that. I think Lauren brings up a good point about the outsized influence of rural states. She's certainly right about that. I guess what I would say is just look at what we've seen over the past 2 weeks. We've seen a president who's scrambling to find a way to address this. He knows that there's pressure on him. I think that's frankly why you've seen him kind of flailing around a bit on what to do next. He's got the NRA, which is this, traditional gun rights lobby power, but he knows that the majority of the country is not on his side. I think that's why you've seen people like Pat Toomey be so eager to attach themselves to Joe Manchin and the Democrats who want to make deals. So, don't take my word for it. I think Republicans are kind of showing their hand on gun control.
Yeah, there's certainly.
But I do think that there's a difference between reasonable background checks, which most of the country supports and most Republicans support, and an all-out gun control ban where it is much more aggressive measures. And I think the nuance there is actually important.
Yeah, well, there's certainly a lot of heat on Washington on the heels of 2 mass shootings and, of course, this police shooting that made the headlines this week. Now, Lauren, what role do Republicans and President Trump want this topic to play as we get closer to the 2020 election?
I think that you're going to have the Democratic Party being more forceful on the gun control issue. You've already seen this with the Democratic candidates in 2020. It's a very popular issue with their base. I do not think it is going to be a primary issue within the Republican Party, or President Trump is going to be talking about it in particular. I do think that you will see him bringing it out, though, in certain areas. There is a concerted effort to make more of an appeal towards suburban voters, suburban women voters, college-educated voters. Some of these people that have been trending away from the Republican Party, since the past 2 elections, midterm most notably, this past midterm. So you're going to see President Trump and some of his surrogates out there talking about some of these measures. I think that's why he's been telegraphing that he would be open to red flag legislation and background checks. And you've had Ivanka calling members of Congress to see what kind of support would be there. But I do not think it'll be a central issue. I think that there's going to be a fine line between going on and upsetting some of his more traditional red state rural voters that have been supporting him, and also making an appeal towards some of these more suburban voters that he's trying to win over for this next election.
Yeah, well, we'll just have to see how it all shakes out leading up to the big election. Now, I want to change gears here. Joel, Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib Friday said she will not visit family in Israel's West Bank. It comes after Israel's government reversed its decision to ban her from the country by allowing her to enter on humanitarian grounds. So what do you make of her reversal?
Oh, I think her reversal, I don't blame her whatsoever. Look, I feel bad for her because she does have actually a family member who she wanted to go see. But, I think Israel's actually kind of projecting that they realize that they overstepped a bit by even, making the concession that they made today. Look, the president was way out of bounds in what he did, and I don't think that that's a Democrat or Republican issue. I think you've even seen folks like AIPAC who tend to kind of be with Bibi Netanyahu and be with the president on a lot of issues. They even said that was out of bounds for the president to call for that and for the Israeli government to actually ban these 2 congresswomen in the first place. So I think what you're going to see here is, Democrats looking for the opportunity to kind of get Tlaib's back, get Omar's back. I'm sure that the president feels like that's a good framing for him. But actually, if you kind of look at it, most American Jews support Democrats. The president only got about 25% of the American Jewish vote last time around. So it should be interesting how both sides kind of resettle after this issue.
Yeah, certainly this decision has been met with a lot of condemnation on both sides. So, Lauren, the initial decision by Israel to bar the Congresswoman from visiting was met with a lot of criticism from Republicans as well. What does that tell you? What kind of messaging does that send?
Yeah, I think there's concern that the power of the U.S. is in that we are respected globally, that our members can go and travel and meet with foreign dignitaries and see where some of our aid is being spent. So there is a concern that this would be, a precedent to really stop, I think, some of the oversight that goes on, and also export some of the domestic politics that are happening. And I think that's actually the biggest concern, is that somehow our politics should not leave our shores. And I think that is the biggest concern. However, you do see President Trump, some of these members that are lockstep with President Trump supporting the issue. They think that it was the right move because it's further hitting, the squad, as President Trump is referring to them continuously, and making sure that they are in the forefront of a lot of these debates and making the Democrats embrace them and defend them more fully, and tying them to anti-Semitism. So I don't know. I think it was probably a stretch, and it definitely wasn't the right thing for foreign diplomacy. But I can see where the president was going with it politically. And again, I think it was a bit of a reach.
So who, if anyone, does this dispute actually benefit?
I don't see actually where the president was going at all with any of this. I mean, the only place I see he was going was that he had a terrible week on the stock market, that he needed something to distract from a really bad news week on the economic front, domestic politics, and he went back to an old hobby horse, beating up on the squad, or at least two members of the squad. That's really the only thing that I see. I don't see any. There is no explanation or rationale for the president's actions here. But again, I'm sure that the president's allies will figure out a way to craft this in a way that's going to be satiating for his base.
Joel says it's a deflection. Lauren, what do you say?
I think it was slightly deflection. I also think he just really does not like the squad, and every opportunity he gets, he's going to be hitting them and trying to tie the Democrats closer and closer to them, so he can paint the Democrats as far left and out of mainstream America as possible.
Well, finally, guys, I want to end this conversation with the same question for both of you. As you're looking at the 2020 field, who's having a big week and who's having a bad week? Lauren, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I really enjoyed watching Andrew Yang this week. He's going to be my pick for who's having a good week. He made the debates. He's polling pretty well, and I think to his own surprise, he's been quite entertaining on Twitter, and the Yang Gang is kind of gaining steam. So I think that he was my pick for best week.
Yang Gang. And what about the worst week?
The worst week, I think, was Beto O'Rourke. You saw him really wanting to come out strong with a reset of his campaign, and I thought he had a beautiful speech that was very passionate, and I think that was a good opportunity for him to try to reset, but this would be his third reset, and then he turned around and went straight to Mississippi to campaign there, ignoring some of the early primary states, and it doesn't make a lot of sense for his campaign strategy.
And Joel, on over to you. What's the verdict?
Well, look, I've always got a soft spot in my heart for the Yang Gang. He's a Brown grad like I am, so I gotta stand up for the homeboy. But my good week goes to Elizabeth Warren. If you just look at the polls and the trend lines, and look, you can make polls do whatever you want to make them do. All the trend lines are pointing in the right direction for her. She has the strongest organization on the ground in those early states. She's got a behemoth, and I think that there is, I keep using the term grudging respect from other candidates. It feels like she's building at a pace where pretty soon I think all of these other campaigns are going to have to start thinking about whether or not they need to start teaming up to tear down Elizabeth Warren a bit. She's really starting to put a kind of a stranglehold. I know Joe Biden feels like the front runner, but I think most Democrats kind of feel like he's a weak front runner, and Elizabeth Warren is right there positioned to take over. She really looks strong in the polls and really looks strong for a good stretch run. And my bad week, conversely, would go to Bernie Sanders, and I think that there's a direct relationship between Warren and Sanders in that they're fighting for the same voters. Sanders keeps losing these jump ball voters, as I'm calling them. These progressives who like Bernie Sanders as the godfather of Democratic progressive thought and politics, but they believe that someone like Elizabeth Warren is better positioned to actually deliver on it. And so I think that Bernie Sanders is coming out on the wrong end of that. You look at his poll numbers, they're all trending again, whereas Warren's trending up, Bernie's trending down, and I'm not sure what can potentially break the momentum in a positive direction for him.
Yeah, well, I've never heard Bernie Sanders likened to the Godfather, but that's a new one. Joel Payne, Lauren Claffey, thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.